Turtle! Hi, I'm Tabitha Huteson.
I'm Hannah McCoy.
And I'm Rachel Owen.
This is our film for the second essay assignment in Dr. Foreman's reading film class.
This is a tracking shot that we took of our detective walking to the murder scene. It's really foggy in this shot, and it was really rainy that night, too.
We did a couple things. This shot is used for exposition and for the credits. Also, to film this shot, we used the wheelchair shot out to Catacombs. And we duct taped 3 umbrellas and a bedside tray to it, put a towel and our camera so that it would be shielded from the rain and we could roll. It looked really funny.
This was the longest shot we took. It was over 3 minutes in total because we went all the way to Andreas. But we cut it down because a 3-minute tracking shot is a bit much. Quick shout out to our actors who were phenomenal and stayed up with us really late. Our detective in particular sunk over 15 hours in recording with us.
The title of our film is 324, which references the amount of combinations of weapon, room, and murderer, 6 times 6 times 9, that can occur in the game of Clue. 324 possible combinations.
The street lights in that shot also kind of make a soft focus.
Here we have the first scene of our victim being murdered. In the previous shot, you could see a shadow moving slightly, foreshadowing what was about to happen. Literally, because it's a shadow. And here we have the phone lighting up. The call is from Detective Pratt, which is a reference to the original Clue game, which was designed by Anthony Pratt.
This scene, we're utilizing kind of the soft focus angle created by the fog. It was very foggy and rainy that night. Also some high contrast between the kind of color outside and the black inside the car.
This is a low angle shot that was taken, Rachel took it, and she was lying on a coat on the ground, and it was wet and cold.
Very wet.
This is the end of the tracking shot we had in the opening credits scene of our detective walking into Andreas. We borrowed a lot from the film noir genre, so we've got a lot of dark lighting and etc.
Okay, this is the first shot of murder. You'll notice that we start with a game board with the murderer, Miss Peacock, and the weapon, the candlestick. That will happen for the rest of the murders. It's a motif we put running through the film. Hannah shot this. This is a pan to the scene of the murder. This shot was taken inside the wardrobe by placing the camera inside and hitting record. This is the only murder where the detective is not actually present during the murder.
And that will be relevant.
That will be relevant later.
Mm-hmm.
You'll note that the clock says 2:05. That is AM. Not PM.
NC 131, which we did
NC
not
131. We did not first that. Nope. This is a deep focus shot. There's a couple reasons it was deep focus. One, the room is so nice. The other reason, though, was because it has a little bit of foreshadowing, because the wardrobe is where the weapon for the murder will come from later on. This is the stereotypical awkward date.
We emphasize the awkwardness by making it one of the longer shots that we have, so we didn't cut away from it at all.
There was rust inside that cup. That's his expression. This is a select focus of Miss Peacock and a close-up also. Shout out to Rachel Kelly, who did a great job with her costume. It just helps the background not to detract from the shot. Also shout out to Rob, who taught us how to die theatrically and how to kill theatrically so as not to hurt anyone. I'm also jealous of his hair.
Mr. Green's piece. This is another tracking shot we did. We wanted to be able to show our detective moving throughout the room and really being active. For this mystery. And by this point, we had returned the catacombs wheelchair. So it was really late at night, I think like 2:30 or so. So the only thing we could find that had wheels was a trash can from Carter. Yeah.
We're using a Christmas ornament to hold the murder weapon. Just kind of a fun little piece. Green is a super psychopath.
So it makes sense in his twisted little mind. Here we're about to have a close-up of her twirling about in her hands. And then we fade into a shot of Mr. Green twirling about in his hands. We'll have more on that later, so I think.
Yeah, that becomes important later.
We show Mr. Green a lot through his hands and his feet. So we're using synecdoche here. Also not showing his face as much kind of adds to the sort of off-putting psychopath feel we were going for. Also, first position ballerina pose. Very odd for a murderer. Here we use the Ken Burns effect to zoom in on murder for that extra ironic twist.
You'll note that he's wearing the noose as a necktie for fun.
We had Reverend, because Reverend Green is used in the British version. But we had him use a syringe instead of the rope for a couple reasons. One, it was more realistic, and secondly, in the original design for the Clue game, a syringe was considered as one of the weapons. So we thought that would be another fun reference. And here, again, to clarify that this is in fact Reverend Green instead of Mr. Green, we have him cross-rob. And then we have a close-up on our murderer's face with him walking towards the camera and staring directly into it, which allows him to break the fourth wall.
Here we have Mrs. White's piece being put down on the board. Here the detective walks up and she's out of focus, and then she gets in focus as she walks closer to the camera. This is a low angle shot of her face looking at the lead pipe. Here Mr. Body is looking into the refrigerator, and this is a rack focus shot of Mrs. White's hands with the pipe.
Just to make her look more angry.
We we went from a close-up on. Yeah.
This is a Dutch angle shot of Mrs. White to make her look crazy again. And another rack focus shot as Mrs. White moves farther away, she gets out of focus, and the pipe is in focus.
Here we have a shot of the detective's feet, which is also going to come in important later.
And another low angle shot of her face looking at the pipe.
Kind of bookending the shot.
Yeah.
And we have Colonel Mustard's murder. This was one of the first shots that we did, so it's definitely shorter. We were kind of first figuring out everything we needed to do. But anyway, up next we have one of the more dramatic shots with slow motion as she goes back into what she thinks might have happened here. We pan from Mr. Body in a second here to Colonel Green as he's inching across the wall to shoot and kill our Mr. Body. We shot this from 3 different angles to emphasize the violence of the scene.
For one of those angles, we had someone lying on the ground, and it was a extreme low angle shot.
This is another tracking shot. We have the detective with her umbrella closed as opposed to open in earlier shots to show the passage of time. So it's been a while since she's started investigating. Also, that red ball is a synecdoche for Miss Scarlet.
And you can also see the dagger that Miss Scarlet used on the table. Here we pan over to see Miss Scarlet playing pool with Mr. Body. these shots are in soft focus because we wanted to show that the detective didn't know all the details about the murder because she wasn't actually there. She was just figuring it out. And this scene is also a montage of the passage of time while they play pool.
Also, Miss Scarlet is a fantastically bad pool player, suggesting that she may possibly have committed the murder out of, petty vengeance for losing a game.
Here we have a close-up in soft focus of Miss Scarlet's face, and you can see the detective on the left in the window and Professor Plum's face on the right in the window.
What will be later revealed to be Professor Plum.
Quick little foreshadowing moment for the viewers.
Yeah, foreshadowing.
And here we have the murder of Mr. Body by Miss Scarlet. A close-up on the dagger, and that is actual theatrical blood donated by Rob. We pan over Mr. Body's body. You can see that there's no blood on the neck, but there is blood on the hand, and that shows that as he was dying, he grabbed his neck, and so that's how all that blood got in his hand.
She didn't want to permanently stain a shirt for a 15-minute movie.
There's the pool ball again, referencing Miss Scarlet, and a close-up on his bloody hand. The detective takes the pool ball as a clue.
Which could be in reference to the fact that clue players do hold about 3 cards in their hand, so that could possibly be one of them.
Here's Mr. Plum's murder, or Professor Plum, sorry, his murder. The detective can't actually get to the scene of this murder before it happens. The murderer actually snatches the weapon away and holds it. That becomes important because Professor Plum is actually revealed to be the murderer. Fun Easter egg of the detective there in the back. We use a lot of select focus in these scenes to sort of provide a storyline for what's going on. There's a close-up of her hand picking up the murder weapon.
To highlight its significance.
Yeah, to highlight its significance. Again, select focus just on the detective instead of using deep focus like in the Miss Peacock scenes. Murderer, not detective. She's gonna actually, there's a little stop motion sequence there. She's gonna actually fix the bookshelf so that they will turn and continue to turn and crush Mr. Body. Here's a shot that was inspired by Decalogue 1, shooting through an object. Tabitha took that. So she's turning. This shot was incredibly difficult to film. It took a bunch of takes, and we eventually had to take Rob out of the shot afterwards, like right here, and film her so she can close the bookshelf all the way without actually crushing Rob.
We also fast-forwarded this shot a little bit to give a little tricky movement to show that it would be a really odd thing to do.
Yeah. And also to make it seem like she was doing it with enough force to actually crush Rob. This was Hannah and Tabitha turning the bookshelves in order to complete the crushing. That also took about 5 takes to get right at about 12:30 a.m. in the library.
Woot.
Yep. Our killer walks away, and there's a little bit of slow-mo there to indicate that she is actually the murderer. We cut to her holding the weapon as before, but we fade into the detective holding the cards, indicating that the detective has figured out the solution, which is, of course, in that card envelope. Here's another tracking shot where we utilize the really cool two-tone lights.
And then finally we are back to the quote-unquote real world, wherein our detective has won the game. You'll notice that Reverend Green is not actually in this shot, because as we mentioned before, we use several pieces of synecdoche to kind of foreshadow the fact that the detective actually is Reverend Green.
For instance,
only 6 people can play a clue game.
For instance, seeing her feet and hands just like detective, or just like Reverend Green's.
And this right here is a 360 shot, where it's just showing all the players talking about the game. This shot took several takes because it's really hard to not get anybody else's reflections in the glass, you can see Mr. Body back there. He was lying on the ground, and he got up and stood behind the real murderer, Professor Plum.
The pieces of the clipboard get blown away. We were actually literally off camera blowing them away to indicate that the game is over.
And here's one of our very last shots of the film with our detective walking away triumphant, and then we zoom in on the exit sign. And finally, in this coming scene, we have the detective pushing over the candle,
indicating that she has figured out the solution and the game is finally over.
Just keep talking. And we wanted that shot because in Mrs. Peacock's murder, we never actually had the detective be able to peek in. So in a clue game, oftentimes you'll be like 90% certain of the weapon or something, but you'll be torn between two cards. So we're assuming that maybe she had like the professor and the library for certain, but she was torn between the wrench and the candlestick. But she chose the wrench, which wound up being correct. And so in the final scene, she knocks over the candlestick. And that's our film.
Thanks for watching.
Yay!
Awkward turtle.
Awkward
Turtle!